one of my favorite places to go is Middle Bass Island. I love the whole experience, you know, getting on the ferry, Miller Boat Line, you know, taking your bass boat and your truck, you know, on a boat out to the island. Just a really cool experience, I think, every single time. It's just like the first time for me. You know, I just know what's out there, and that makes it so much more fun. You know, there's absolutely nothing like the Great Lakes in the summertime to go smallmouth fishing. Just an incredible experience. You know, anytime you get a chance to go up north, you know, you got to check out some of my old videos. Got a ton of different videos from St. Clair to Lake Erie, you know, different places that we fished, different techniques that we've used. Be sure to go back and check those out on my channel. You know, I think a lot of people assume that you go to these awesome lakes and when you pull up, you just start catching them, you know, the moment you put the boat in the water. And, you know, unfortunately, that's just not the way it goes. You know, I've been going to Lake Erie for almost 30 years now, and you just don't always pull up and get on them. Sometimes you have to look for them. You know, these fish, for whatever reason, sometimes are difficult to catch, difficult to get to entice to eat. You know, and on this trip, the water's a little dirty. It's early spring, pre-spawn. And it's one of those trips that the Alabama rig actually played. You know, you've seen the other videos, the umbrella flash mob junior. Obviously, you can't use that one in Ohio because you can only use 3 hooks in Ohio. Nonetheless, the Alabama rig still works in the pre-spawn, in the right condition. You know, dirty water, had some wind. Check out those pink Caltex. And one of the few times on Lake Erie I've actually caught a bunch of fish on it. Usually on Lake Erie, I've had my hopes up. You know, the A-rig will be the thing. You know, 1 year over around Kelly's Island, I'll lit them up on it. But other than that, this would probably be my best day on Lake Erie with an Alabama rig.
That's a hog to be boat flipping.
Now, boat flipping a 5-pound smallmouth is probably not the smartest thing to do. You know, luckily I've got braid. You know, if you watch the other videos I post on my channel, there were bass boats everywhere. We had to grind for some fish on this trip. Felt really good to finally put some good ones in the boat. I always throw the Alabama rigs on braid. You know, the water's a little dirty here this time of year at Lake Erie, and it allows me to get away with that. But we also caught fish on this trip on a bandit crankbait. You know, Ricky, he stayed with that bandit all weekend.
Give me that.
You know, we didn't catch a lot of fish the first couple days. Really had to work for them. But we finally ran into some good ones in a couple different spots. You know, a lot of the old spots that I fished, you know, they've dried up. You know, some of the spots in the old videos, you know, other people watch those and were just like the same stuff that I do. A lot of those spots, you know, it seems like community holes now. There's boats just sitting on them every day, especially over around Sugar. So I really had to look this year for some new stuff and some different stuff, and ultimately it paid off on this trip.
Little fat one.
Hey,
You got a smallmouth.
you know, there's just nothing like it. If you ever get a chance to go north, every time you hook one of these smallmouth, they go straight vertical, straight out of the water. It's just an awesome experience. One of the hardest fighting fish, pound for pound, that you ever hook up with.
One more again.
You You know, every time I go to Lake Erie, it never fails. People don't have a lake map, never looked at a lake map, and they take a boat and they head across the lake. And I'm just gonna be honest, that's one of the dumber things you can do. Lake Erie, the bottom's limestone. You know, if you've been to St. Clair, there's a lot of sand. Lake Erie is not as forgiving. You know, and these people, they went right up on some rocks that are the size of my boat. There's really nothing I can do to help them. I don't have a big enough boat to drag them off the rocks that are the size of my boat that they drove their boat up on.
Oh my gosh.
So this is a tough spot. You know, everybody was okay. Nobody was injured. They got Rescue Marine out there, and the next morning they were able
We
to
can't help them.
remove the boat from the reef.
Are you kidding me? Sitting out there, he's bombed out right there. Yeah, he bought another huge rock there.
But if you're gonna head out on Lake Erie, get a lake map, look at a lake map, familiarize yourself with the reefs, what the cans mean, and how they mark the channel, and be safe.
Oh, it got off. No, it didn't.
You know, I told you at the start that this is one of the tougher trips, but we still caught a lot of fish, just not a Lake Erie lot of fish. So
I thought, boy, it got off, but it must have come straight this way.
it was a little tougher, but you know, I really like to catch fish on a crankbait. You know, it seems like that bandit crankbait, they just hit it like a linebacker. I mean, they absolutely load up and smoke it. It about takes the rod out of your hands, you know, when the crankbait bite is on at Lake Erie. It's just one of the most fun ways to catch them. You know, I'm not really live scoping here. I'm looking, don't get me wrong, but I'm not necessarily targeting fish and throwing at those fish. I'm just kind of working, you know, these rocky banks and this rocky structure that we're fishing, you know, some of this offshore stuff that we fish, and, you know, luckily we're running into some fish. Fish just seem really scattered out on this trip. You know, it's mid to late May. The weather's been rough this spring. It was just a different spring, and the water temperature seemed to take forever to come up. But you know, one thing I noticed, as I said earlier, a lot of the spots that get a lot of the pressure just didn't seem to produce the bigger fish on this trip. Seemed like they were all smaller bass on those community holes.
Pretty good looking, man. Huh? Pretty good looking.
Oh, you just spit it out right there.
My bad, I'll be a little fast. 412.
You know, I've got my stepdad Rick with me on this trip, and I was super excited for Rick to be able to get him on some quality fish. You know, like I said, the first 2 days were a grind, but you know, Rick eventually ran into his personal best.
Oh, no.
Oh, God, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's good. I think it might be a damn little thing.
No, it's a big smallmouth. I saw it. It's a giant. I mean, it's
Walleye, small.
a smallmouth. It is a brute. It is a giant. That is a giant.
A 5.5 pound smallmouth. It was just an awesome fight.
That is
you know,
a giant.
I honestly thought he had a catfish or a sheephead early on, just because of the way the thing was taking drag. You know, that's what you go to the big lake for. That's the reason
6 pounds?
you go to the Great Lakes. You know, just nothing like that
6 is
experience
my
of
guess.
catching a personal best smallmouth.
Giant. Look how thick that thing is. clip.
Unfortunately, this Lake Erie trip has come to an end. Please do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Be sure to hit us up with a comment. Love to hear what you thought of the video.